Welcome to the Death Doula Duo. I'm Sara Kovash.
I'm Jennifer O'Neill.
And this is where we explore the profound mysteries of life and all things death.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. I am excited today because we are here with Bo and Alanna Ireland, who are both Methodist ministers. Alanna is the spiritual director and chapel coordinator for St. Paul School of Theology, a United Methodist seminary, and lead pastor at Wellston United Methodist Church. And Bo is an ordained elder for the United Methodist Church and executive director of Lazarus Community, which is a nonprofit funded by the United Methodist Church, a ministry lifting up those who are experiencing homelessness through faith, community, and advocacy in Oklahoma City. All that to say, in today's episode, we're really excited to hear their perspective on death and how they approach the challenges of comforting those facing end of life as well as those who are grieving. And I've really wanted to get y'all's perspective for a while on death. So I'm glad that you're here.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Jen.
Thank you.
Welcome. Can you share a little bit about your ministry and what inspired you to become ministers?
Hey, you want me to start?
Go for it.
Well, I think when I was younger, I always felt very called to issues of justice. And, I've always had this, I've always been able to see injustice in the world and always had this sense of urgency about it. And so I wanted to be a missionary when I was younger, but I never got the opportunity to do it. And now that I realize all the harm that can come from missionary work, I think maybe it's for the best. And then I kind of moved away from the church when I was younger for years and years because of some of the harm that the church has caused. And then as I started raising children, I just really felt called back to the church and raised our children in the church. They were baptized in the United Methodist Church and didn't really think that I was called to be a minister. And then what happened is that one of our children came out to us and we were very affirming. I mean, we've always been very affirming of LGBTQIA individuals, but it caused us to be very vocally and visibly affirming in a community that sometimes is not. And what happened is that other parents started calling me for advice on how to reconcile their faith with having a queer child. And the more I did that, the more I wanted to learn and better understand the Bible and the culture that it came out of and how to care for people who are really deconstructing and having a lot of people, it's a spiritual crisis. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but it is. So I decided to go to seminary and wasn't sure what I would do. And then just my vocation has evolved to be a pastor and to be a spiritual caregiver. And I'm probably the most unlikely person. If you talk to somebody who knew me 20 years ago, they would probably say, oh, no, not her. But but it's just the journey that I've found myself on.
I know at one point you were doing the chaplaincy program. Are you still doing that?
So I, during COVID, just had the opportunity because they didn't have a lot of chaplains who were willing to work during COVID. Since I had a master's of divinity and had some pastoral care experience, even though I'm not a board certified chaplain or anything, I was able to do a stint as a interim chaplain at St. Anthony here in Oklahoma City.
Nice.
And that was an amazing, amazing experience.
Nice.
I bet you dealt with death there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Bo?
Yeah. So
Tell us about Lazarus and et cetera.
Absolutely.
Et cetera.
I want to go back for a moment because Alanna and I have known each other for almost 40 years, and so I met her in high school, And yes, she was always very passionate about justice and ecology. And she met me, and I was a good high school boy who had responded to a call to ministry, and I was on the straight and narrow.
And I could not wait to corrupt him.
She could not.
And that lasted. And how long did that last? Were you uncorrupted?
Well, it actually lasted quite a while because I made my intentions known that I would like to date her, marry her, have babies with her, but she would not date me, marry me, or have babies with me. And it was a couple years later that we started, getting friendly with each other. And I had given up my call to ministry and had run off into alcohol, drugs, and was doing radio broadcast in the Tulsa area.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it really was. And then operated a construction company for 20-something years. And in the middle of that, responded again to a call to ministry and walked back into the church, which I had not been to in a very long time. And started back through, getting bachelor's degree, master's degree, pastoring a small church in rural Oklahoma, and then now doing urban ministry to some of our cities, most exploited and vulnerable at the Lazarus community. And we offer showers, clothing, care, mental health, food, and just a place to find comfort and community. We do that on Wednesdays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then we, on Sundays, have basically a worship service that is very inclusive and offers a meal.
And then you guys also provide some housing for people.
We do. Yeah.
If they apply. And
over the past 3 years, we've had men, women, and children in a converted facility, an old church that has become sort of our residential quarters. And in fact, just 3 weeks ago, we went to a male-only facility. And so now we have the availability to house 12 men at a time inside of that facility.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is.
Well, and
Definitely
I have to
needed in the community.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have to say, for anybody who doesn't know, that I've known you guys for 28 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's been a while, and got to raise our kids together, and that's been really fun. So what do you guys feel that you bring from your personal experience with loss when you're comforting people, whether it's somebody facing death or somebody who's grieving?
Let you go first this time.
I think that what I hope to bring is just a sense of peace. That in the middle of a death, whether it's planned or unplanned tragedy, that what I try to bring is just a sense of peace. There's enough unrest through all of it that my aim is just to bring comfort, bring peace, and usually inevitably it's to bring closure. That there's a moment there that just needs to let everybody know that it's okay to say, this is the end. And, whether it's the person that is making their transition or whether it is the family around them. And all of them handle that moment in so many different ways that my aim is just to be a person of peace and meet them wherever they're at.
So what's a way that stands out to you in how people deal with death?
When I pastored a small church in a rural community, and they had a lot of death that ranged the spectrum. So people who had lived a great life, and they were elderly, and they were making that transition, and there was family gathered around, and so just be there at bedside. Make sure everybody feels comfortable. Encourage people to say those last moments of words and things they need to make sure are said, but then also for the person, we've gathered around and we've chuckled, we've told stories, we've sang songs, I've read books, just with persons who were very alert and persons who were less than alert, and just the sound of a voice, sometimes holding a hand, even if they're not responsive. So that end of the spectrum, and then also the other end where, a tragedy happened, one that was really, really was very traumatic. I was a pastor to a family that had a lot of tragedy. And so one more tragedy had happened, and the daughter in this family had just finished chemotherapy for cancer. And we had a big celebration moment. They went home, and she was eating a steak dinner with family and choked on a piece of meat. I mean, at this dinner that was celebrating her clean bill of health, and she
Wow.
choked on a piece of steak, was unconscious for over 12 minutes with a blocked passage, and then EMS arrived and they cleared the passage, but it was not an easy task, and she was pronounced brain dead, but they did not have a do not resuscitate order, and so they resuscitated her, and she was on life support for another 14 days, and I was at the hospital visiting with the family, and they finally had the decision that it's time to go ahead and end life support systems. And there was such a misconception. There was so many ideas of what we see on TV that they're basically going to turn the things off, and that it's going to happen very quickly.
Right.
And instead, it was another 4 days.
Oh, wow.
So they weren't able to use her organs, I guess.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Is that common that they, once they're taken off the life support, that
I think it
take
is, just
several
because
days?
just like when someone's terminally ill around that time and they're not eating and drinking,
Gosh, I did not.
it can take that long or even longer.
I did not know that.
So an untimely
That has to be
death there.
even more
and
tragic.
Yeah.
Watching
added to
all
the
of the
story.
different family members respond to that differently, where
Mm-hmm.
one parent of that child is ready, the other parent is grieving and is angry. Brothers, sisters, kinfolk, and each of them also bringing their own trauma and their own expectations to the table.
And that could be why it took so long for them to make that decision, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That one was there were some real moments of discomfort for me also, because I'm there to help them along, but then they're like, wait, don't turn any of the systems off yet, because the great niece hasn't come in and said her goodbye yet.
Yeah.
And and then she wants to come through, and it was pretty dramatic. And afterwards, everybody's gathered around holding hands, and they turn the machines off, and nothing happens.
And then there's the expectation, yeah.
And so there was an expectation that didn't get accomplished.
Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's heavy.
So it's trauma after trauma with that, or
Yeah.
with that experience, yeah. Yeah.
How do you handle self-care? I mean, that sounds like something that was pretty stressful for you. How do you handle self-care in a situation like that? I mean, that seems like something that would be really necessary to me.
Yes, it is necessary. I don't do it well.
I can appreciate that.
I think that's the most honest answer I can give you. That community suffered a lot of loss. They had some timely deaths of people who had aged, but then a lot of car accidents, drug overdose, and I think I do my best with self-care, but I probably do not do as well as I should. It's one of those things that...
Can you name one thing you do?
I try to take some time off. I don't do it as often as I should. And my spiritual director and I talk about this often, where it seems like, there's just so many waves that you're trying to swim across during one day or a week. And so sometimes I try to take my self-care moments or Sabbath moments in pieces, where it may just be a moment of the day, or It may be a couple of days that we get away and go camping or hiking. Those are some of the things that I really enjoy to find self-care. Sometimes it's just sit down and watch something stupid on TV.
Mhm.
Okay.
Two things that you do that I think not enough pastors do, and I do it too, is that you go to therapy regularly, and then you
That's a big one.
also have a spiritual director.
Yeah, those
So,
are big
and
ones.
I think that for people who are in caregiving professions, those two things can be very helpful.
Mhm.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, and I'm pretty transparent about seeing mental health. I do see a mental health therapist on a regular basis, usually at least every 2 weeks, and spend an hour with them. And then also I see a psychiatrist for medication. I think that's another self-help moment that not enough professionals
Full disclosure,
are.
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And thankfully I have a loving spouse who's very good at alerting me to moments that I'm cratering out. There was Christmas this past year. I just wasn't acting myself anymore. I'm usually pretty jolly. I like to be very active. And my wife came to me and said, you're very cranky.
I'm worried about you.
I'm worried about you. And then she disclosed also to me that she and her therapist had talked about me. And that they had determined I was suffering a pretty major depression.
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
And I listened to those moments and got some help too.
That's important. I'm glad that you were willing to disclose and share that part. And thank you. Yeah, we all need reminders that self-care is an absolute must. It's not something that just should be done. It needs to be done. That didn't come out right, but you know what I mean.
I do.
I mean, it's great that we're talking about this because I really did want to ask you guys. You guys are probably, really my favorite couple. And so I love y'all's.
Thanks.
I love y'all's relationship, but also, friendship. And I wonder, and I see a lot of what you do, but if there's things that you could share that you do for each other to fill your cups.
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I think like what Bo talked about of just being able to say when we see it because sometimes, when you're going along and you're just, you're getting really burned out and you don't see it in yourself. And so it's good to have someone who can say, I see, you're getting all those signs of burnout. You're getting irritable, you're dissociating, you're not interacting with your family, you're zoning out, you're staring at your phone too much, like all those things we do for burnout, and to have somebody say that, but also have somebody be willing to listen, and it's not like we're this perfect couple where it's like, oh, thank you so much for pointing that out. I mean, sometimes it's very tense, but I think that for example, if I say something to Bo and he gets very defensive about it, instead of continuing to like push of no, there's something wrong with you, to back off and give him time to process that. And I know I need that sometimes too, where he says something to me and it raises my defenses. And I just need a couple days to kind of go, oh, okay, now I'm seeing the pattern that he's talking about too. But I think also just doing like acts of kindness, which is something I've kind of learned from him. It doesn't come naturally to me like it does for him. Like he's one of those people, like if he cooks for you, he will fill your plate and bring it to you. And I just didn't grow up with that kind of care. So I'm like, well, there it is. Go get it.
I'm totally with you. I'm that way too.
So I've kind of learned like sometimes it's those little acts of kindness of like, I'm going to bring you something. I'm going to bring you a cold drink or,
I kind of like that it's like a role reversal, like with that, just that example in particular, it's usually in traditional, man versus women, or
the women brings out
the women brings out the plate full.
Yeah.
And so I like that you're
couple
using that as an
reversal
example.
Moments. I'm the one who usually cries in the movie theater.
Oh my gosh. He's the biggest baby in the movies.
Yeah, there are times we'll be on the couch and we'll be watching a movie and I'll try to hide it. Like it's not
It's not
getting me.
happening.
I mean, really, I'm just tired. And
My
she'll
allergies
look
got
at me
really
and
bad.
Really? And I'm like, all right.
Every time I cry, my husband looks at me and says, "Are you crying?"
Shame.
What?
It's good. Crying's good for
It
you.
is. I was actually thinking about that. I was crying about missing my son, and I got to this thought, and I thought it feels good to cry. It does feel good to cry, and sometimes I worry that I indulge in that a little too much. Sorry, off track.
No, that's quite all right. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe we need to cry sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I
Well,
definitely
especially
a
big
lot.
life events. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
those are
that's a
big.
huge change for you.
Yeah.
So.
Just for the listeners that didn't hear the context to this, I dropped my son off in Colorado this weekend. Oh no.
Big, yeah.
It's okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's okay.
And I'm really missing him. And I'm just, yeah. So there's the context to that.
And yeah, and grief comes in waves, even life event grief. So,
And it sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sneaking up today.
yeah.
Yeah. So our children, I don't have a child that lives out of state, thanks goodness, but like sometimes I still just miss them being close, and like I'll have that moment of like still getting a little teary about it. So
So this isn't going away. Is that what you're telling me?
We have to, yeah, we're parents like forever. And
Right. It isn't. We're always a parent.
It's probably just like, when we lose someone to death.
Yeah.
That our grief is going to come at unexpected moments. It's going to ebb and flow. An old childhood song will come on the radio that was dear to you, and it's going to bring you to tears, just like a love song.
And we know this when we're dealing with others, but when it's ourselves,
It's
Good to
always
get a
like, wait,
reminder.
what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? You're being ridiculous. I know logically it's not ridiculous, but
yeah,
there's a
but
level of
there's that cultural expectation that we're going to have this stiff upper lip. and
be
it's
stoic
really-
about
yeah,
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you just said something that I think that's our expectation with grief and loss. That we think it's going to be logical.
Yeah.
It's not logical.
Yeah.
No.
Or
That's a
that
good
it's
point.
yeah, or that it's going to go away. And it's
Yeah.
been my experience because I was very close with my great grandmother, and I lost her many, many years ago. And I still have a lot of grief around that. And and I've just stopped expecting the grief to go away, and I've just started to think of it more as that saying, I contain multitudes. That like I have the capacity to hold grief and joy
Yes.
side by side within me, and I don't have to expect the grief to go away, and it doesn't diminish the joy. So
I like that. That's nice.
I like that too. So, Alanna, I want to hear from you about your ministry with people going through grief or dying. And I'm also going to throw a little curveball. So,
oh no.
how is it different, or is it different at all if it's somebody who doesn't have a faith or isn't a believer?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I was going to say that my experience in ministry is very different from Bo's because I just started pastoring a church, and I haven't really pastored a church. I've been more of a chaplain and spiritual director. And so I've not done a funeral, and I haven't really had those bedside moments with people that I've built those relationships with. So it is different when you're caring for someone that you've just met and you've walked into the room. And you're, and all you have is a few notes on their chart at the hospital. So, and repeat the question because I kind of got off in left field.
Just if you have any experiences with a patient that you'd like to share, and if your approach would change, how would you comfort them if they were or weren't having a faith?
Absolutely.
That's a good
So
question.
I think that one of the things that I always tried to do is just to go in and not try to, because Viktor Frankl always talked about how when our experiences that we're trying to make meaning out of them, and that's how we heal from them, is to make meaning. And it wasn't for me to go in and tell them what the meaning of their experiences was, but more to just hear how they were making meaning out of their experience. And a lot of times to just be a sounding board for that, or if perhaps they were just struggling to find meaning, or maybe if they were going in a direction that was going to be harmful to them or others, to offer alternatives for how you could make meaning out of this experience. So sometimes some people will use the cliche of, well, God has a plan for everything, and that can be comforting for someone. I would never go in and say that to someone.
Right.
This
Thank you.
terrible
Thank you
thing
for
has happened and God had a
not doing
plan
that.
because God wanted this awful thing to happen. But for some people, that's a comfort, and they'll say it to themselves, and they'll say, well, God had a plan for this, and they'll feel very comforted in the moment. And so sometimes it would be a matter of reminding them that you may be angry later, and that's okay. You may experience all kinds of emotions as as time goes on, and you see this from a different light than you're seeing it right now. Because some people will be very at peace in that moment of tragedy, and then later, all this rage will come out of nowhere. And so I just kind of would, warn them that that's normal and that may happen. And they don't believe you at the time, but
They thank you later when it does happen.
yeah, well,
if it does happen.
but
If you see
maybe
'em,
they
yeah.
will think, okay, this is a normal part of the grieving process, and for some people, maybe they think that God did have a plan, but they're angry that this is God's plan. So I might just say something like, not every Christian or person of faith believes that. Here are some alternative ways to look at that, and just offer that up and not tell them that's what they have to believe. But, just reminding them that the Christian faith is very diverse, and there are lots of ways that people think about tragedy and suffering. And for non-believers, it could be, just something about reminding them of where they draw their strength from, of pointing out the people in the room that are there to support them and the supportive community around them, or, just something like that. But there were cases when I was working as a chaplain that the person was just angry and grieving. And I mean, I have a very brief relationship for them. And the only thing I really have to offer them is compassion, and just to say, I'm very, very sorry that this is happening to you. And is there anything I can do for you? Or if at any point you just need someone present to sit with you and listen, then please call me and I'll come back. So it can really run the gambit depending on the person's belief, whether they believe in God, or they have some spiritual belief, or they don't have any spiritual belief at all.
I like that idea of like broadening the path beneath their feet so that they fit into it and into their experience, and bringing peace again, kind of.
Yeah. And sometimes they told me to F off, and I just leave, it really just depended.
How many times did that happen?
Not very often. Like most of the people who were atheists, once they realized I wasn't there to proselytize, then they were okay with me being in the room and talking to me and opening up. So it wasn't very often that would happen, but a few times, and I have to honor that and respect that and just leave, and usually I would say, if you do want someone to just listen, and we don't have to talk about God or religion or faith at all, but if you're just scared and you want someone to sit with you, then I'll be happy to come back,
That's one of the things I liked about that chaplaincy program. I sorry to bring that up again. I applied to get into that chaplaincy program with St. Hildegard.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't do that anymore because it's not a board certified chaplain program that hospitals hire board certified chaplains. So I decided that it really, for the limited amount of time I have, I decided not to do that program.
I see. That's
But
fair. That's
yeah.
that's what I was actually talking about earlier. But that was one of the things I liked about that program, because I was actually an atheist for 20 years, and I'm no longer an atheist, but I'm not religious, and I don't have, any set belief in any one way of thinking or beliefs. For some reason, my words are escaping me today. But I like that. I think that a lot of people they misunderstand what a chaplain is, and they think that a chaplain is to come and preach to you, and it's only for Christians, but they're for everybody.
Yeah.
They're interfaith. They're for all faiths, and
Yeah.
so that it's a good reminder for anybody who is an atheist that a chaplain can still be helpful.
Yeah. And there are Buddhist chaplains and Muslim chaplains and everything, and really trained chaplains, no matter what
For each-
religion they
Oh,
are
okay.
supposed to be more interfaith. And it may depend on the context of where you are. But I know at St. Anthony, when I was an interim chaplain, that they really emphasized us being able to minister to all people, no matter what their beliefs
That's
were.
awesome.
So,
Have either one of you guys had people that have needed or wanted to work through their spiritual faith at the end of life?
I haven't done a lot of bedside stuff. Mine has mostly been like kind of crisis type situations. I think Bo's done more of the where he spent long lengths of time with people when they were dying.
I mean, it seems like everybody at the very end, I know I'm using a glittering generality there, but
Right.
I would say almost everyone that I've had interaction with towards the very end of their life has some questions. They want some surety, okay, I'm making my final journey. How do I make sure that when I get to the pearly gates or wherever they're going, that I'm in?
Right.
Do I need to say something special right now? And I just assure them you don't have to say anything special. I myself believe that we will all enter the hand of God, and there's no special words that we have to say beforehand. That I serve a God of love that's going to meet us no matter what, and that hell is an empty place. So I just encourage no fear, just walk right in. You're going to be fine. And that's usually a pretty affirming moment. The side that I probably have more struggle with is the moment where either someone has passed on or there's been a tragedy, and it's the family that is like, okay, how do we do a communion service when they're not able to take communion because we want to make sure they're in? Can you baptize them after they're dead?
Oh, goodness.
And those are the moments where I'm like, guys, it's going to be fine. Please know that, I'm going to speak to you today and let you know God is going to love your beloved and accept them into arms of mercy. But you were talking about, moments where someone who did not have a faith or a spiritual journey and the family has questions. And those are moments that I still want to honor the person and their beliefs. But it's a really, really tight walk sometimes between what the family wants, because they want to make sure their loved one gets into some sort of afterlife. Mm-hmm. And that balance is there does need to be some training there, I think, or at least a real sense of just leaning into the heart of love and a very open-ended moment of that God,
I think that is something that we don't talk about enough as far as with the family, because I know, and you guys were a source of peace for me when my dad died. You guys were some of the first people that came over, and that experience was one that made me question, my little beliefs about God, and opened me up to the possibility of what you said, that God loves everyone if he loves the mountains. And so
no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I like that you mentioned, the family having to deal with families maybe having a different belief than the person that died. We dealt with that with my grandfather. My aunt was always fairly religious, and while my grandparents weren't, she tried to instill some of that. And she did manage to get my grandfather to think about some of these things towards the end. But I know that when we had his funeral, there was some concern with the preacher who performed the service not honoring some of our wishes as far as, talking about being saved and things along those lines that we really had asked not to be discussed. We didn't want it to be like a call to action. We wanted it to be just his service, and that didn't happen. Unfortunately, he he had an agenda, and that's what he did. So
On behalf of clergy, and I'm going to make myself available to you right now and just say, I am so sorry.
thank you.
That to me is a form of abuse, and your family should not have had to endure that.
Thank you.
That is not the place that should ever take place. You're hitting one of my pet peeves, by the way.
Well, I'm glad to bring it up and have your thoughts on it.
To bring comfort and closure and to honor the family's wishes. That should not happen. And Alanna was talking about, meeting the families and the person who has passed on's wishes. And as she was sharing about that, I was thinking of a young man that was in a recovery community that I'm associated with, and he passed away unexpectedly. And the family was really clear with me. We want a pastor to do this. And it was an honor to serve them in this way, because it was not a Christian burial, and we didn't need it to be. I was there to show them the heart of God without being religious. And I pray that more pastors would do that type of work. It's, to me, much more healing to the family.
It would be nice to have a database with pastors who are open to that.
Yeah, and I would say too, I've never done a funeral, but I've done some weddings, and one time with a wedding, I just didn't feel like I could do what they were asking for, and I feel like instead of pastors, like if you really feel like this is against what you feel is right, just say no. And
exactly, yeah.
And so with this
send
wedding,
it to somebody else.
Yeah. And that's what I did, is I helped them find somebody
that's awesome.
who could do what they were asking.
You didn't just turn them away.
No, I didn't.
And leave them hanging.
Yeah.
That's
so
nice.
Yeah. So reach out to the ecumenical community and find somebody to do it if you can't do it. Like if you can't do this without it being an altar call, that's fine. Find them a pastor who will do what the family is asking.
Well, and because otherwise it falls into what you mentioned in the very beginning, which is the hard, I can't remember how you said it, but just the, what happens when you're hurt by the church.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
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 Creates great wounds, and I don't think it needs to be that way.
Well, and if it didn't create it, it just digs them deeper. If that's not what created the wound in the first place, it just can amplify or exacerbate it.
I think that there's nothing wrong, and I think it should be more acceptable, not just for pastors to say, I may not be the person for you, but I think it's also perfectly acceptable for the person who needs to grieve and needs to have a moment of comfort and closure to say, you know what? That's not okay with me. I don't want anything that you have put on the table here. It's not what would bless me. It's not what would bless my beloved.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you answering that, and I appreciate your relating to it in that way. It wasn't that we didn't want anything relating to God to be talked about at all. We just didn't want it to be a call to action. So.
Some of the funnest services that I've done have been those that they wanted someone who could show the heart of God and bring comfort and closure but they didn't want Christ. In fact, they didn't even want God in the middle of it. They just trusted that I would show the heart of love, which to me is God.
I was thinking about the funeral you did where the young man, the family was agnostic, and the young man was really into comic books, and you talked about the spirituality in comic books. So I think there are ways that you can spiritually care for people without using what they loved and what they were passionate about.
That one was so much fun because we talked about the spirituality of comic books.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, that one was so much fun. And I think that actually my spirituality was deepened by the exercise of working with the family.
I really think that highlights what you mentioned earlier, the meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Bring Deadpool humor into my funeral.
I'll remember
Jen,
that.
It would be an honor and a privilege.
He loves Deadpool, so he would love that.
I mean, I had one of my good girlfriends say, you will just, I mean, she didn't say I would hate it, but she said she really didn't like it. And she went with her, boys and family. And she's like, I really could have stayed home. And I went and I was like loving it. I was like,
It's
I must
funny
have
how
some guy
people
humor in
have
me.
different humors.
Absolutely.
If you guys could pick a comic book
That's a good one.
to describe, like
Your
to say at your
relationship.
funeral, to say at your
there you
funeral.
go.
Yeah, either way.
Oh no.
Oh, Jen, that's not a fair question.
We're not big comic book people, so that's really
Or a
hard to
movie
answer.
or a song or something.
Oh.
What is a movie related to death that you would recommend our viewers to watch?
Oh my gosh. Now Elena's she's gonna roll her eyes at me. If for those who are listening, Elena's gonna roll her eyes at me.
We'll confirm if she does.
Hear it. No, I'm
I'm
just
very curious.
All right. So one of my favorite movies that is about life and death and reconciliation and grace
Oh, I know what he's going to say.
is this movie called 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And it's
I haven't
about
seen that yet.
heartache and tragedy and grace. Oh my gosh. And yes, I cried. But
yeah, it's a good one.
oh my gosh, I see so much in that movie. And it's not a funny movie. I mean,
No,
it
we
is
need to rewatch it.
a rub
serious
your
movie.
nose in the
Yeah.
dirt of humanity movie. And I loved it.
But that's
And-
real.
I love those kinds
That's
of movies.
real, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you see her roll her eyes?
She did not.
No,
she,
but I
she
knew
was
exactly what movie
she
you were
knew
gonna
what. Yeah,
say.
she was.
Yeah.
She had figured it out. That was the look she had.
Yeah.
No
Well,
eye
and I think a
rolling.
lot of people, because we saw it with your sister, and I think a lot of people, like, she was like, why do you like this movie? But there is this one scene where this guy, they're in the hospital. So these 2 men are in the hospital together, and one of them has beaten the other guy senseless. And then he ends up in the hospital very injured. And the guy that he's beaten up realizes it's him because he's almost unrecognizable. And he realizes it's the guy that beat him up. And he takes him over. He has this glass of orange juice, and you think that he's going to pour this glass of orange juice on the man's burns. And spoiler alert, but instead, like, he gives him a drink of water. And I'm like, that is the whole Christian story in one little scene in a movie. So
Wow.
I would agree with you that that's a good one. The one I was going to say is What Dreams May Come.
Oh, that's my
because-
favorite.
Because the Bible, a lot of people don't want to agree with this, but the Bible doesn't really have much to say about the afterlife. The Bible is about how we live in the here and now and how we bring the kingdom of God to earth through the way that we live. So I think that we can use a lot of imagination and creativity when we think about death and the afterlife. And that movie really embodies that for me. So
That is an amazing movie. That is one of the most heart-jerking.
it really is. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for your fresh perspective on
Yes.
just bringing love into religion and
Yeah, I
helping us
really
heal.
enjoyed this conversation.
yeah.
This is nice.
Heaven is
Thank
what,
you.
or afterlife, I think, is what we live into it. And so when Alanna was talking about the different varieties that we might experience in the afterlife, I just finished up my board examination to see if I was good enough
pastorly
enough to be a pastor, to join the pastor club.
Orthodox enough is the real question.
And they asked about my belief on heaven and hell. And I remember telling them that so many people that I had met were concerned about, am I going to see my wife? Am I going to go fishing with my dog? And so people have these different perspectives of what they expect the afterlife or heaven to be. And I remember saying, I don't think any of those are wrong. I think that it is particular to the person themselves. This is what they expect. And they were like, well, what do you expect? I said, I believe that I will become part or a cell of God. That I want to enter the holy soup of my maker.
Becoming the universe.
Is if all my old dogs are not there, it's not heaven, and I don't want to be there.
I can agree with that one, definitely. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time, and I really enjoyed this conversation. And I know Jennifer was happy to have you on.
Thank you guys for having us. This was fun.
It's been fun.
Good. So glad. Well, stay tuned for our next episode where we continue to discuss unique perspectives about death.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks,
y'all.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us as we journey through life's most enigmatic reality. I'm Jennifer O'Neill.
And I'm Sara Kovash.
And we are
the Death Doula Duo.
The Death Doula Duo is brought to you by the Possibilities podcast platform.
If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to be on the show, please email us at thedeathdouladuo@gmail.com. Until next time, may all your discussions about death be lively.